The LC 1.800 is the exact same size as the D 4.800. That means it's going to go in the exact same spot on this. Both seats basically have the same track underneath them. Let's take a closer look at this amplifier. It has the power and protect lights, the GTO sense, it has AccuBase. A nice feature about the LCs is they have their line output converters built into them. This essentially has an LC2I built into it. So you have the full AccuBase circuit. AccuBase is for fixing a situation where you have bass roll off. Whereas you turn up the volume, the mids and highs continue to get loud, but your bass stops producing. This adjustment enables you to fix that. It needs the on-off switch because like in this case, we're doing line level in, it isn't gonna have any bass roll off. Crossover vary between 30 and 230. Gain control, 180-degree phase switch, your milk source input protection light, and your gain maximized light. Same distortion detection. On the end, we have two 40-amp fuses, 4-gauge input. Our high-level input is located here, line level input, the ARC1 bass knob input, and 8-gauge subwoofer output wires. We are going to be using the ARC1 on this. The reason why I like using this is that it's just a straight volume knob. It's just up and down. There's no other features in it. You can't accidentally push it and change things. Just volume up, volume down, bass more, bass less. Yay. I like to grab the wire for this first and get it into the amplifier because even still to this day, I forget to run this. Center up the amplifier and get it screwed into place. When working with ABS, I strongly recommend you always pre-drill. ABS just doesn't act well when you just go right into it with a screw. Time to come up with a game plan in order to run these wires. We already know that the signal wire and the remote turn are going to come across through here. I'm going to pre-drill those same holes into this and zip tie it into place once I get it into the car. The sub wire, which is located on this side, is going to come across and go because I need that to go up into the passenger side of the car. When we had the box built, we had the speaker cup put on the passenger side. The power wire is also going to come out this way too. We're going to run it up the floorboard and into the engine bay on the passenger side because there's a couple grommets there to go through. We'll have two outputs in the firewall, one on the driver's side, one on the passenger side. That'll make it easier though getting that wire across in this particular vehicle. We have a nice big route to run our wire through the engine bay over to the battery. With the plan established, just like on the previous amplifier, I made up my wiring, ground, power, then a subwoofer wire here. It's a dual 10 gauge. The first thing I want to do is drill my holes here against the side for the bass knob wire. This is going to run up into the center console. Next to the emergency brake is where we're going to put the bass knob. I'll use the wire ruler to mark where I want my first set of holes to go. I'll switch to the longer one to add in a hole for my RCA run, as well as my remote turn on. Slide it down a bit, drill my next row of holes. Add in the zip ties. These I'm just going to loop through and have ready for when we get it into the car, and then I'll cinch them up. It's time to add in my sub wire. Just like on the other side of the car, there is a hole in this area here that I can run my wire directly out of. That means that the sub wire is just going to be a straight shot out. If you're going to be doing a sub wire with any form of labeled heat shrink or something like that, make sure that you pay attention to where the positive and negatives is. You don't want to put it on like this and you can't see the logo. Line up where I'd like my holes to be, and just like on the other side, I'm going to use the shorter holes because this is going to be coming out and bending. Slide the ruler over, add in our zip tie. Brings us to power, which is the last portion we need to worry about. This is going to go straight out too. The nice thing about having clone left and right amp mounts and the way the power wire works, we're going to do the same exact mounts on this side as we did on the other side. We just need to line them up, get them straight, drill our holes. Holes are all drilled, and add our zip ties. This amp board is all set and ready to get into the car now. We'll take a closer look at it once we get the RCA ran into place and the remote turn on hooked up. The amp managed to creep its way underneath the seat, cinched up all the zip ties. This seat also had the ground right here, so we were able to use the factory ground point. Subwire is running back, ran in, and is connected to the subwoofer back here. Power wire is ran along inside and up into the firewall. Also, the bass knob wire is located right about where it needs to be. The bass knob is located here next to the emergency brake. It is mounted in place. This is Toyota and audio control. I just have to get it now into there. In the car, it looks just like this. You can easily get to that volume knob. Yeah, just there you go. Fernando asked me to add some imagery to his fuse holder, so we have done that. I will get this over to him so that he can get it into the car. What we have is the audio control and system fuse. Here you go, man.
Thank you, sir.
Fernando has informed me that the battery is done. We have labeled on the wire to tell us what amp goes to what fuse. This is the LC 1.800 fuse here. It's labeled on all sides. If these do have to come apart for a reason, you make sure you get the right one matched up. These also are made to come off, bolted in here, but if you just need to remove this panel, you just twist the fuse, it comes right off of the mount. You can easily remove this panel and get back, replace the battery, put everything back in place. This bolt is a second bolt. This isn't the bolt that's holding the battery, there's another bolt underneath it. That way, if you do need to take this panel out, you can take it out. The battery mount is still in place. We've also added in a second ground wire. This was the factory ground here to the body. We've added a 4-gauge ground to that. Next is going to be plugging in the interface. Already connected in the speed wire. I just have to get the rest of the plugs in, and we can get this back together and take a look at how to attach that front screen. When plugging in the aftermarket radio, some cables are going to be longer than others. For example, this GPS antenna here is pretty long. Start with your longest cables. It'll make it much easier as you're working back into the dash. Also, try to keep an eye on how the cables lay on top of one another. It's extremely hard to keep this organized when moving products back into the dash. There's just so much going on. But having a little bit of rhyme or reason to it will make it a little easier. The last thing you want to do before you start putting in the dash is just go over it mentally in your head, making sure that something didn't get pushed into the dash, all the cables are in nice and tight. Once you're satisfied with that, tip it up, start sliding it into place. I like to go up high in the dash to check underneath. Also, if you have screws that need to go in on the bottom somewhere, always keep an eye on that. It's helpful to have some kind of a flashlight in place to see. The radio should go in fairly easy. There should be no resistance with it. It should set freely onto the back place. If you're having to push it all the way in to get it in there, pull it back out and see if you can move some of the wiring down and out of the way or off to the side. You don't want a bunch of wires bunched up behind the radio. If you run into a situation where there's plastic behind it that you can remove it. When you're satisfied, screw it into place. We need to get that top cover on here so that we can get our radio in and make sure it turns on. This radio has a locking mechanism that has to be installed in place in order for this radio to turn on. You have to screw the front panel into these metal brackets and this piece will go on last. To test it though, just to make sure that it's gonna work, we can simply set this in place into the switches, slide this into the dash. Our unit powers up, test our backup camera, steering wheel controls, and make sure that those peripherals work. Testing the volume, up and down. The nice thing about the iData interface is that if one button works, they should all work, unless there's something wrong with the steering wheel. This is fairly new. The likelihood of that happening is pretty thin. Plug in our phone and test to make sure CarPlay works. Reverse camera is working. We also have backup sensors that are on. Navigation is coming up. With all those tests done, pull our screen back out and we'll get it screwed into place. This screen does tilt without being locked in. It has a friction hinge, which is really, really nice. Pull it all the way forward, and this will allow you to get into the back of the radio and put your 4 screws in. And there we have it. The radio's mounted in the dash.